Yellowstone has a talent for drawing crowds into a handful of famous scenes. The rainbow ring of Grand Prismatic, the clockwork drama of Old Faithful, the thundering brink of the lower falls. Yet the park is also a vast, living caldera, an 1872 experiment in conservation spread across more than 2 million acres, where some of its most revealing places sit just off the main currents of traffic. These are not secret in the sense of forbidden. They're simply easy to miss unless you arrive with patience, good maps, and a willingness to trade a headline attraction for a quieter, more intimate Yellowstone. Begin in the far northwest at Bighorn Pass, a short climb from the Bighorn Pass trailhead near the park's boundary with Montana. The trail rises quickly through forest toward an open saddle where you can look across the Gardner River country and feel the park's geography in your bones. Steep volcanic ridges, broad valleys, and the sense that Yellowstone is not a single place, but a stitched-together mosaic of ecosystems. This corner also carries human history. Before roads and entrance stations, these passes and river corridors were travel routes for indigenous peoples for millennia. Among them, the Tukudika, sheep-eater Shoshone, as well as Crow, Blackfeet, Nez Perce, and others with deep connections to the region. Later came miners, prospectors, and the U.S. Army, which managed the park from 1886 to 1918 and left a lasting imprint on how Yellowstone was protected. Bighorn Pass is a reminder that Yellowstone's story is as much about movement and access as it is about scenery. Not far away, the Beaver Ponds Trail outside Mammoth Hot Springs offers a different Yellowstone than most first-time visitors expect. Mammoth is famous for its travertine terraces, white, tan, and orange steps built by hot water rich in calcium carbonate. But take this loop, and you slip into a quieter world of willow flats, ponds, and open meadows where beavers have engineered their own hydrology. Look for the details: chewed aspen stumps, channels cut through sedge, and the way standing water creates habitat for waterfowl and amphibians. It's a lesson in Yellowstone's other great force besides fire and ice: animals as landscape shapers. Travel tip: go early or late in the day when the light is low and the meadows feel alive. Carry bear spray and keep your distance from wildlife, especially in brushy sections where visibility drops. If you want a geothermal area with the color and chemistry of the big names but a fraction of the foot traffic, aim for artist Paintpots in the lower Geyser Basin, just off the Grand Loop Road between Norris and Madison. The trail is modest, but it introduces a crucial Yellowstone concept. Hydrothermal features are not all the same. Here you'll see bubbling mud pots, thick, gray, and plopping like slow-motion stew, alongside bright mineral staining that can look like spilled paint. Mud pots tend to form where there's less water and more acidic conditions, often influenced by hydrogen sulfide gas that breaks down rock into clay. The palette comes from iron compounds and heat-loving microbes. Walk the boardwalk, stay on it, and notice how the ground can feel hollow in places. Beneath your feet, hot water and steam are constantly rerouting through fractures in the rock. For a view that feels like an earned secret, drive the narrow road to Mount Washburn's Dunraven Pass and stop at the Chittenden Road trailhead. Many visitors hike partway up Mount Washburn, but fewer continue to the summit when the weather looks uncertain or the wind picks up. At the top, the park opens like a relief map: the Yellowstone caldera rim, distant peaks, and a sense of just how high you are, over 10,000 feet. The summit also holds a piece of park history in the form of a lookout presence tied to early fire detection and management. Yellowstone's relationship with fire has evolved from aggressive suppression to a more nuanced approach that recognizes fire as an ecological process, especially in lodgepole pine forests. On the way, watch for bighorn sheep and, in summer, wildflowers that bloom in a compressed alpine season. Bring layers even on warm days. Wind and sudden storms are common. In the shadow of Yellowstone's most famous canyon, there's a quieter, more contemplative place. The South Rim Trail stretch between Artist Point and Point Sublime. Artist Point is rarely empty, but most people stop there, take the classic photo, and turn back. Continue on foot, and the crowds thin quickly. The canyon's story is a geologic argument written in color. Rhyolite lava flows, hydrothermal alteration that weakened rock, and the Yellowstone River carving down through it. The canyon's yellows, creams, and rust tones come from chemically altered rock, iron compounds stained by hot water long before the river exposed the layers. If you time it right, the sound of the falls fades, and you hear wind, ravens, and the river far below. A reminder that Yellowstone is not just spectacle, but scale. For those willing to trade a famous geyser for a quieter eruption, seek out Lone Star Geyser, reached by a relatively gentle hike or bike along an old service road south of Old Faithful. Lone Star is not as predictable as Old Faithful, but it's often active, and when it goes, it's a clean, confident column with fewer people around to turn it into an event. The route itself is part of the appeal. Lodgepole forest, glimpses of the Firehole River, and the sense of traveling through the same geothermal plumbing that feeds the upper geyser basin. Bring water, and remember that even easy distances feel longer at Yellowstone's elevation. If you're patient, you'll also notice smaller thermal features along the route, steam vents and warm runoff that hint at the hidden circulation below.
On the opposite side of the park, away from the geyser basins entirely, the Lamar Valley is famous, but most visitors treat it like a scenic drive, not a place to walk. A lesser-traveled option is the hike to Trout Lake, near the northeast entrance road. It's short, but it delivers a compact Yellowstone lesson. A cold, clear lake, often with river otters or waterfowl, set among forest and meadow where bears and wolves also move through. The lake is known for its cutthroat trout, native fish central to Yellowstone's food web. Their story is complicated. Non-native lake trout and other introduced species have reshaped aquatic ecosystems in the greater Yellowstone region, affecting everything from osprey to bears that once relied on spawning runs. At Trout Lake, you can sometimes see trout cruising the shallows, a quiet glimpse into the park's ecological arithmetic. If you want Yellowstone's thermal power without the crowds of the major basins, consider the West Thumb area of Yellowstone Lake, but not just the boardwalk. Most people do the loop and leave. Spend time with the idea that you're standing on the edge of a high-elevation lake inside a giant volcanic system. West Thumb itself is a geothermal basin partly submerged by the lake, where hot springs vent into cold water. The result is a rare juxtaposition: steaming pools beside a vast, wind-ruffled inland sea at nearly 8,000 feet. In calm conditions, the lake can look deceptively gentle. In storms, it turns fierce, and its cold water is dangerous. This is also a place to remember that Yellowstone Lake is not simply scenic. It's the largest high-elevation lake of its size in North America, and it sits atop an active volcanic system with ongoing hydrothermal activity and frequent small earthquakes. Another overlooked corner lies in the park's south, the Lewis River Channel between Lewis Lake and Shoshone Lake.
Many visitors speed past on their way between West Thumb and the south entrance, but the channel area offers a chance to see how Yellowstone's waters connect. Shoshone Lake, accessible by trail, is the park's largest backcountry lake and has a quiet grandeur that feels far from the tour bus Yellowstone. The region also carries a human narrative of early exploration and naming, and of the long debate over how much access a national park should allow. Yellowstone's backcountry rules, permits, food storage requirements, campsite designations, are not bureaucracy for its own sake. They're a hard-won framework shaped by decades of human-wildlife conflict, especially with bears. If you go prepared. Navigation, weather awareness, and bear-safe practices are non-negotiable. Finally, for a Yellowstone experience that feels almost like a footnote until you see it, visit the Obsidian Cliff area near Norris. You can't climb the cliff itself, but you can stop and look and understand why this dark volcanic glass mattered. Obsidian forms when lava cools so fast that crystals don't have time to grow, creating a sharp, glassy rock that fractures into blades. For thousands of years, indigenous peoples quarried Yellowstone obsidian and carried it across the continent. Archaeologists have identified Yellowstone obsidian in sites hundreds, even over 1,000 miles away. That trade and travel network is one of the most powerful counters to the myth that Yellowstone was an empty wilderness before it became a park. The cliff is also a geologic signature, a visible reminder that Yellowstone is built from eruptions, flows, and the restless heat beneath. Taken together, these places recalibrate the park. They show Yellowstone as a layered system. Geothermal chemistry and volcanic history, rivers and wildlife corridors, indigenous presence, and the complicated legacy of conservation. They also reward a certain kind of travel. Start early, because parking fills fast even in quiet areas.
Carry bear spray and know how to use it. Hike in groups when possible. Make noise in dense vegetation, and give animals enormous space, especially bison, which injure more visitors than any predator. Stay on boardwalks in thermal areas. The crust can be thin and the water can be near boiling. Build extra time into your day for road delays caused by wildlife jams, and treat those delays not as inconveniences, but as reminders that the park runs on its own schedule. Yellowstone's famous sites are famous for good reason, but the park's character, its texture, its science, its human story, often comes through most clearly in the margins. A windy summit, a beaver-shaped wetland, a quiet geyser on an old road, a cliff of black glass that once traveled in pockets and packs across ancient North America. These are the Yellowstone chapters most visitors skip, and the ones that tend to stay with you longest.